The sky above the Afghan mountains was quiet, almost too quiet. The wind moved gently across the rocky cliffs, carrying dust and the scent of danger. 12 Navy SEALs moved slowly across the uneven ground, their eyes sharp, their weapons ready. They had trained for this, prepared for every move. But none of them knew what was waiting ahead. In a small operations base many miles away, Corporal Jessa Ruiz sat in a dark room filled with screens. She was young but sharp, her fingers dancing across the controls of a military drone. Her job was simple, just watch and report. She had been assigned to provide support for the SEAL unit, but only if direct orders came from higher command. Jessa leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she watched the drone feed. Something felt off. She could see shadows in the valleys where the SEALs were heading. Too many shadows, and they were not moving with the wind. She paused the feed, zoomed in, adjusted the thermal view, and her heart skipped a beat. Contact? She whispered to herself. She radioed command. Possible hostiles near SEAL Echo Unit, recommend alert status. But the reply came quickly, cold and flat. Stand by, no confirmation yet. Do not engage. Jessa felt her jaw tighten. She had seen patterns like this before and in training videos. In combat simulations and in real missions, this was an ambush, and the SEALs were walking right into it. But without orders, her hands were tied. Back in the mountains, the SEALs moved in two lines. Lieutenant Mark Dawson led the unit, his face calm, even though he too felt something strange. The silence was too thick, the air too heavy. He signaled a halt and whispered into his mic, "Anyone see anything?" No one replied. They scanned the area. But the enemy was hidden, waiting, hidden like snakes in the tall grass. Their radio chatter was minimal, just enough to stay in touch. Jessa zoomed the drone camera again, watching carefully. She marked every strange heat signal, placing small red dots on her screen. She knew these weren't animals. They were men, armed, ready, and waiting. She opened her mic again. Request permission to fire drone sniper round. High threat near team. Again. The answer came back with no emotion. Negative, no confirmation. Observe only. Jessa felt helpless. She had joined the military not to sit in a chair but to make a difference. Now her team was walking blind and she was forced to watch. Suddenly her screen flashed. The feed began to break. Static dancing across the screen. Something was jamming the signal. She switched to backup visuals. But it was too late. The drone feed cut out completely. And so did the SEAL's radio echo unit. Do you copy? Jessa asked again and again. No answer came, just silence. Inside the command center, officers were talking, but no one seemed urgent. To them, it was just a possible signal glitch. A common thing in the field, but to Jessa, it was a sign that something terrible had started. She leaned back in her chair, trying to stay calm. Her fingers hovered over the manual override. She knew she could take control of the sniper drone herself, but it would be direct disobedience. It would end her career, maybe worse, but in her mind, she could already see the 12 SEALs surrounded. Men she had never met but had watched on her screen for hours. She had studied their faces, their movements, their strengths. They trusted the system to protect them, and the system was failing them. Jessa closed her eyes for a moment. She thought of her father, a retired SEAL who used to say, "When you know what's right, you don't wait for permission." The room around her felt colder now. She opened her eyes, focused on the console. Her finger hovered over the manual control key. She was not supposed to act. She was not supposed to think. She was just supposed to watch. But Jessa Ruiz was done watching outside. The sky above the mountains began to change. Dark clouds moved slowly, hiding the sun, and in the valley below a trap was closing. Gunfire would soon echo through the rocks. Men would scream for help, and one woman far away had to make a choice. The storm was about to begin. The moment the drone feed went dark, Jessa's heartbeat grew louder than the machines around her. The hum of the air conditioner, the quiet clicking of distant keyboards. Everything faded into the background. She stared at the blank screen in front of her, frozen for a second. Her fingers shaking over the keys. Echo unit. "This is Watchtower," she called again into the comms. "Do you copy?" Still no answer. No radio signal, no visual, just static. And that kind of silence in the field meant only one thing. Contact. Inside the command center, everything still moved slowly. Colonel Briggs sat in his leather chair, sipping his coffee. He glanced at Jessa's screen and shrugged. Probably interference. Mountain air messes with signals all the time. Jessa turned her head sharply. Sir, we need to send support right now. Briggs raised an eyebrow. And risk exposing more men to a false alarm? We don't even have confirmation they're under fire. Jessa stood up, her voice calm but firm. With all due respect, sir. I had 12 heat signatures hiding in rock formations before the feed died. He didn't even flinch. And still no gunshots on record, Corporal. Stand down. That's an order. Back in the mountains, the gunshots had already started. Echo Unit was caught in a perfect ambush. Fire came from both sides. One SEAL took a bullet to the shoulder before he could drop to the ground. Another rolled into a ditch, his rifle jammed. They didn't have time to think, they just reacted. Lieutenant Mark Dawson cursed under his breath. He had sensed this, felt it in his bones. But now it was too late. His men were spread out. Half exposed, no high ground and no backup. Fall back to the rocks, he shouted. You smoke! Watch your left. Bullets sliced through the air like angry bees. Smoke grenades exploded, painting the valley with white clouds. But the enemy knew this ground too well. They fired through the smoke. Precise, brutal, relentless. One SEAL screamed, hit in the leg. Another was pinned down near a boulder, out of sight, his comms crackling. The team medic crawled through dirt to reach him, dragging his kit with his teeth. Jessa could do nothing but listen to the silence. Every second that passed without a voice made her stomach twist. She opened a private channel to the drone sniper control. Her hand hovered over the manual override again. Her thoughts raced. If she disobeyed and activated the drone, she would be court-martialed. If she didn't, 12 men would die while she sat in a chair. She looked at the screen again. Still black, but she could feel them. 12 dots in her mind, each one trying to survive a nightmare. Suddenly a voice broke through the static, faint and cracked. This is Echo 3. Heavy fire. We are pinned. Request support. Jessa froze, eyes wide, then another voice followed. They're everywhere. We've lost Echo 7, ammo low. We're not going to make it. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Instead, she grabbed the headset and repeated, hold on. Just hold on. Back in the command center, Briggs was now on a call with higher command. His voice was calm, even lazy. We may have a minor situation, but I doubt it's serious. Jessa slammed her fist on the desk. Sir, we are losing them. They are dying and we're sitting here doing nothing. He gave her a sharp look. Watch your tone, Corporal. This isn't a movie. Jessa turned away before she said something that would ruin everything. She pulled out her small field notebook, the one her father gave her before his last deployment. Inside it was a quote written in neat handwriting. Heroes aren't the ones who follow every order. They're the ones who follow their heart when the system forgets how. Her breath slowed, her mind cleared. She sat back down, plugged in her override key and whispered, You gave me the tools, Dad, now I'm using them. In the valley, Echo Unit was running out of miracles. Dawson dragged 2 wounded men behind cover while bullets hit the ground inches from his boots. They were low on ammo, one man was unconscious, and the medic was bleeding from a shrapnel wound. Dawson pressed his comm again, hoping someone was still listening. This is Echo 1, any friendlies out there? I repeat, any eyes in the sky? Far away, Jessa pressed one button. Then another, the drone sniper came to life. Systems online, ready to fire. She wasn't waiting anymore, not for permission, not for backup, not for anyone. Because in a war zone, when good men are dying and leaders are sleeping, one woman with a trigger can become a whole army. The drone systems came alive with a low mechanical hum. Lights blinked across Jessa's screen, one after another. She stared at the interface, heart pounding. Fingers steady. She had just crossed a line that could end her career. But right now she didn't care. On the screen, the mountain valley came back into view. Grainy at first, then clear. She could see the smoke, the flashes of gunfire, and the broken forms of soldiers fighting for their lives. Her men, the 12 SEALs she had been watching for days, were surrounded. Jessa took a deep breath. All right, boys, I've got you, she whispered. She switched the sniper drone to manual mode. Target lock online, wind speed measured, angle adjusted. Her finger rested gently on the trigger pad, down in the valley. Lieutenant Mark Dawson ducked behind a rock, breathing hard. Bullets ricocheted off the stones above his head. His ears rang, his hands shook, but his mind stayed focused. Echo 5, you still with me? He shouted. A voice crackled back weakly. Barely, sir. They've got high ground on both sides. Mark peered through his scope and saw nothing but smoke and movement. The enemy was smart. They had planned this ambush perfectly. Then he noticed something. The firing from the east ridge suddenly stopped. He frowned, confused. "Hold your fire," he whispered a second later. A loud crack echoed through the valley, sharper, cleaner than any rifle they carried. An explosion of dust appeared on the ridge. A body dropped. Enemy sniper down. Mark blinked. Who the hell fired that? Up in the operations center, alarms blared. Jessa's terminal flashed red. Unauthorized weapon use detected. Officers rushed toward her station, shouting, "Corporal Ruiz." "What did you do?" But Jessa didn't look up. Her eyes were locked on the screen, scanning for her next target. Enemy sniper eliminated. She muttered softly. 11 more to protect. Colonel Briggs stormed over, his face red with anger. "You just violated direct command protocol, Ruiz. Do you understand what you've done?" Jessa's voice was calm, but her hands never stopped moving. "I did what you should have done, sir." Briggs reached for her console. But Jessa had already locked the system. She had coded her own failsafe, a small trick she learned from her father's old field software. "You can't stop it now," she said. "I've rerouted control through an independent link." Briggs froze for a moment, realizing she had outsmarted him. "Do you even know what that means?" He shouted. "It means they live," she said quietly. Down below, Mark Dawson was trying to make sense of what was happening. Every time he tried to move, an enemy shooter went down before he could aim. Someone or something that was covering them. His men looked at him with disbelief. "Sir, who's doing that?" "We don't have Overwatch," Dawson shook his head. "I don't know, but I'm not complaining." Jessa zoomed the drone camera again. Tracking heat signals, she found a heavy machine gun nest dug into the hillside. Firing nonstop, 3 enemies crouched behind the sandbags. She took aim, waited for the wind, and fired. The drone's rifle barked once. Precise, clean, silent death from miles away. The nest exploded into silence, Jessa whispered under her breath. "That's for Echo 7. In the command center, chaos spread like fire, technicians shouted. "She's rerouting drone power." "We can't cut her out." Briggs slammed his fist on the table. "Someone shut her down before she starts World War III. But deep down, even he knew. She was doing what they couldn't. What they wouldn't outside. Thunder rolled in the distance, dark clouds covering the sky. Jessa's drone glided silently between the peaks, its sensors cutting through the storm. Each shot she fired was calculated, every movement precise. She wasn't just disobeying orders, and she was rewriting them. In the valley, the SEALs regrouped under the cover her shots created. The medic stabilized a wounded man, whispering, "Whoever's watching over us, keep going." Mark raised his head again, scanning the ridge through binoculars. He saw the glint of something in the clouds. Not lightning, not stars. He realized it was a drone. He pressed his comm. Even though he didn't know if anyone could hear. "This is Echo 1 if anyone's out there." "Thank you." Jessa heard it, faint but clear, and for the first time in hours she smiled. Her hands trembled slightly as she whispered back, "You're welcome, Lieutenant," but she couldn't celebrate yet. Enemy reinforcements were arriving. Dozens of new heat signatures moving in from the north. She switched to her second drone, activating dual control. The console glowed blue as she said quietly, "Let's see how far I can push this before they drag me out." Behind her, military police had entered the room. They surrounded her station, waiting for the order to arrest her. Briggs shouted, "Corporal Jessa Ruiz, stand down immediately." But Jessa didn't move. Her focus stayed on the screen, her voice steady. "You can court-martial me later, sir, right now. I'm busy saving your soldiers." And then she fired again. One shot, then another, each one perfectly placed. Each one saving a life below. In that moment, in that small dark room, a single woman sitting behind a glowing screen was fighting her own war. A war against fear, against bureaucracy, and against silence. And her first shot had already broken more than just enemy lines. It had broken the rules. The command center was no longer quiet. Voices clashed like thunder. Alarms flashed red, and boots stomped on cold concrete. But in the middle of that chaos, Jessa Ruiz sat still. Her eyes never blinked. Her fingers danced like a soldier on the battlefield. She now controlled 2 auto-sniper drones, a pair of silent machines circling over the valley like steel angels. Each shot she fired was saving a life. Each click of her finger was rewriting the story of 12 men trapped by death. Colonel Briggs paced behind her like a storm about to explode. He barked into a phone. "Yes." She's still firing. No, we can't shut her down. She locked us out with some kind of firewall. Someone whispered. She's flying blind now, manual mode. No radar guidance, Briggs growled. Then she'll crash it, or worse, kill civilians. But no one moved to stop her because deep inside, every soul in that room knew she was their only hope out there. Back in the valley, Mark Dawson crawled to a new position, dragging a wounded man with one arm. His other arm was bleeding, but he didn't stop. He had heard stories about drone strikes, but this was different. This was personal, like someone was watching over them. His comm crackled again. Echo 1, do you copy? Mark grabbed the mic, heart jumping. Yes, who is this? A calm female voice replied. You don't need to know my name. Just know you're not alone anymore. Mark's lips parted in shock. That voice didn't come from a machine, it came from a person. And for the first time since the ambush began, hope lit up his chest. Whoever you are, keep doing it, he said. You're turning the tide. Above them, Jessa's drone circled like hawks. She adjusted the angles manually, lining up a dual shot. 2 enemy RPGs were preparing to fire on the SEAL's only cover. She breathed slowly, in and out. Like her father taught her, the wind was strong. The angle sharp, she fired, and once, then again, boom. Both threats disappeared in dust and smoke. The SEALs below looked up, wide-eyed. Did you see that? One of them whispered. Whoever's up there just saved our butts, another said. Wiping blood from his forehead, Jessa wiped sweat from her brow. Her body was shaking, but she couldn't stop now. More enemy troops were pouring in from the North Ridge. Too many for the SEALs to fight alone. She zoomed the camera and counted at least 20. She opened the drone's auxiliary weapons panel. 2 microgrenades, one small, precise, deadly. Please let this work, she whispered, and pressed the launch key in the valley. 2 explosions shook the earth, not massive, not messy, just enough to stop the enemy rush. It gave the SEALs time to regroup, to breathe, to reload, but in the command center, Jessa was now surrounded by military police. Briggs gave the signal. Ruiz, you are under arrest for disobeying a direct order and unauthorized drone engagement. Jessa stood up slowly, hands raised. Sir, let me finish, she said softly. 5 more minutes. That's all I need. Briggs hesitated behind him. The big screen now showed a live feed. 12 soldiers alive, fighting back, regrouping. One of them waving toward the sky, mouthing thank you. A technician turned to the colonel. Sir. She saved them. Briggs clenched his jaw, then waved the MPs back. You have 5 minutes, he said. Use them wisely. Jessa sat again and immediately resumed. But her hands weren't just flying across keys, and they were saving lives. She switched one drone to a new task, aerial mapping. She used the drone's camera to scan the land around the SEALs. She spotted a dried-out stream hidden under thick brush. It could lead the SEALs out of the kill zone. She grabbed the mic again. Echo 1. Change heading 40 degrees west. There's a dry creek you can follow out. Mark replied instantly. Copy that, moving now. He turned to his men. Let's move. We've got a ghost guiding us, and like shadows in a storm, the SEALs began their escape, not by fighting harder, but by outsmarting the enemy. The drones covered them from above. Jessa tracked every heartbeat she could. She wasn't just one soldier anymore. She was a full support team, a guardian, an unseen force inside the control room. Nobody was shouting anymore. They were watching in silence. Watching one woman do the impossible. When the SEALs finally reached the edge of the ridge, away from danger, Mark sent one last message. To whoever saved us, and we owe you our lives. Jessa didn't reply. She simply looked at the screen and whispered, No one gets left behind, not on my watch. And for that moment, Jessa Ruiz was no longer just a drone tech or a corporal. She was something more. A one-woman army in a war that forgot to care. The sun had nearly vanished behind the mountains. Darkness crawled over the valley like a silent wave. And in that cold shadow, 12 SEALs moved like ghosts. Wounded, exhausted, but alive. The dry creek bed Jessa had spotted became their lifeline. It was narrow, hidden by thick brush, and filled with old rocks and silence. Each step was slow, careful. The only sounds were the crunch of boots, soft groans of pain, and distant gunfire fading behind them. Lieutenant Mark Dawson carried one of the wounded on his back. The man's blood stained his uniform, but he didn't stop. He kept his eyes forward and his ears open, and above him he knew someone was still watching. Back in the command center, Jessa sat like a statue, Her hands didn't stop moving. Her eyes didn't blink. The drones were low on fuel, power levels blinking red, but she wasn't done yet. She turned off the drone's night vision overlays, switched to thermal, sharpened the sound filters. Every heartbeat in that valley became visible, like stars on a map. She could see which seals were slowing down, which ones were limping, which ones had stopped breathing. She leaned into the mic again. Echo 1. You're one click from a cave system. It's not on maps, but it's there. Natural rock walls should give you cover, Mark replied, his voice hoarse. Copy that. Keep guiding us. We trust you. He didn't know her name, had never seen her face, but right now, she was their only light in the dark. One seal fell behind, Corman Reyes, the medic. Slipped and hit the rocks hard. He didn't get up. Man down, someone called. He's not moving. Mark turned back instantly. 2 men helped carry Reyes, but he wasn't responding, no pulse on his wrist. Blood on his neck. Echo command. We've got a man down, Mark said into the mic. Any chance you can get eyes on us? Tell us if he's still here. Jessa zoomed in fast. She could see Reyes's body heat. Faint. But there she held her breath, counting the rhythm of his chest. Slow. Weak. But breathing. She clicked the mic. He's still with you. You need to elevate his legs, keep him warm, and slow his heart rate. Mark looked up stunned. You a medic too? She answered softly. I'm whatever you need me to be right now. And then a new sound came through her headset. A whisper, not from Echo Team, but from a nearby drone mic. Foreign voices, quiet, fast-moving. Jessa froze, listening carefully. Enemy scouts were in the area. She could hear them breathing. Stepping softly, searching. They're looking for you, she whispered. Northwest ridge, moving fast, 2 men with dogs. Mark raised his hand silently to the others, motioning toward a nearby thicket. They all dropped low, covering their mouths. Holding still. Down below, the sound of footsteps grew louder. The dogs barked once, then went silent. The enemies passed just 10 feet above the hidden seals. Unaware, Jessa watched it all from above. Not breathing. Only when the enemies were gone did she speak again. You're clear. For now. Inside the command center, everyone was quiet, even Colonel Briggs, arms crossed. Just stared at the screen. Nobody spoke, because they all saw what she was doing. She wasn't just giving support. She was pulling 12 men out of death with her bare hands. One of the technicians whispered, She's guiding them like she knows the ground. Another said, She's not guiding them. She's protecting them. Jessa glanced at the clock, only 20 minutes of drone fuel left. After that, she'd be blind and they'd be alone again. She keyed the mic again. Echo 1, I need you to reach that cave system before I lose visuals, Mark replied. We're almost there, just keep talking to us. She paused, then asked gently, Do you have everyone? Mark looked around, did a silent head count. 11. Where's Echo 9? They froze. 1 man was missing. Jessa checked the drone logs, rewound the thermal scan. She found him, 20 meters back, collapsed behind a log. Wounded, unconscious, alone, without waiting. Mark and 2 others turned around. They sprinted in the dark, following Jessa's voice in their comms. 10 meters to your left, 3 meters straight, and right there. They found him, bleeding badly, lifted him up, ran back under moonlight, and made it to the cave just as the last drone battery blinked red. The screen in front of Jessa faded slowly to black. Her drones were done, but her job wasn't. She turned to Briggs. We need to send evac now. I bought them time. That's all I could do. Briggs didn't argue this time. He picked up the phone and said 3 words. Launch the choppers. And as the choppers lifted into the night, Jessa closed her eyes and whispered, I'm still with you. Even in the dark, the cave was cold, damp, and tight. 12 bodies huddled together in the darkness, their breaths fogging the cold air. Outside, snow had started falling softly over the Afghan hills. It painted the battlefield white, as if trying to hide the blood beneath it. Lieutenant Mark Dawson crouched at the entrance, watching the terrain. Beside him lay Echo 9, still unconscious but breathing. Farther inside, Reyes the medic had come back around. Barely holding on, the men were alive, but only just. They had no food, no water, and almost no ammo left. 1 more enemy push, and this cave would become their grave. And now, there was no drone above them, no eye in the sky, no sniper guardian, just silence, snow, and the sound of boots in the distance. Back at the outpost, Jessa Ruiz stared at a blank screen. Her drones were out of fuel, her systems offline, Her hands still hovered over the keyboard like they didn't know what to do without orders to break. But her mind was racing. Colonel Briggs stood behind her, arms crossed. "You did your part, Corporal," he said. "Now let it go." Jessa didn't reply. She turned instead to the tactical map, zooming, scanning, calculating. She remembered something. Weeks ago, during a training drill, she had marked an old enemy supply route nearby, a narrow path used for smugglers and ammunition trucks. That same route now held a golden opportunity. A bluff, a risk, a final move before the board flipped over. She looked at the weapons bay, unused drone gear, field explosives, and a parked Land Rover. Her heart pounded in her chest. She had already disobeyed every rule in the book. Why stop now? She grabbed her jacket, her field tablet, and keys to the Rover. As she passed Briggs, she simply said, "They need a miracle." "I'm going to bring one." He didn't stop her. Not this time. The road to the ridge was rough and slippery. Snow fell harder now, blurring the trail and covering tire tracks. But Jessa drove with focus, her eyes locked on the GPS and her hands gripping the wheel like a soldier grips a rifle. Inside the cave, Mark Dawson heard a sound, distant, but different, not footsteps, not gunfire, a low rumble, like a vehicle crawling across stone. One SEAL peered out with binoculars, his eyes widened. Sir? You're not going to believe this." Mark looked through the lens. A lone Land Rover was climbing the hill, fast, lights off, engine humming. "What the hell?" he whispered. Jessa parked the Rover just beyond enemy view. She pulled out 2 satchel charges, field explosives meant for vehicles. She had an idea, a bluff, and maybe 10 seconds to make it work. She rigged the charges with remote triggers and planted them near a pile of snow-covered rocks. Then, she set up a small decoy beacon, a military signature that mimicked a large force gathering. She knew the enemy scouts were scanning the area. This fake signal would draw them. "Let's see if they take the bait," she muttered. Hiding in the brush moments later, enemy voices echoed in the distance. Shouts, movement, confusion. Mark and the SEALs heard it too. Gunfire erupted, not at them but toward the bluff. "They think we're over there," Mark said. "Someone's feeding them bad intel." The bluff was working. The enemy squad moved toward the decoy site. Aiming heavy fire at nothing, that's when Jessa hit the trigger. Boom, a blast ripped through the ridge. Snow, smoke, and fire exploded into the air, knocking several fighters to the ground. From the cave, the SEALs watched in stunned silence. "What just happened?" someone asked. Mark smiled slowly. "Whoever our angel is, she's still out there, but the fight wasn't over." Another group of enemies, more disciplined, more alert, approached from the south. Jessa spotted them too late. Gunfire erupted, bullets whizzing past her cover. She ran, zigzagging, diving behind rocks, firing her sidearm as she moved. A bullet grazed her shoulder. Tearing fabric and skin, she didn't stop. She rolled into the Rover, slammed the door, and drove full speed toward the cave, chased by fire, chased by fate, chased by fear. Inside the cave, Mark saw the headlights. "She's coming here," he shouted. The SEALs readied their last grenades, forming a line. If she made it, they'd fight beside her. If not, they'd buy her time. The Rover came to a stop just outside the cave. Jessa jumped out, bloody but standing. The SEALs pulled her in, slamming the entrance shut behind her. For a second, everything was still. 12 men and 1 woman, breathing heavy. Weapons drawn, snow falling outside like ash. Blood dripping on stone, but they were together now, and together. They had one last stand left in them. Snow kept falling like silent ash outside the cave. The white hills looked peaceful, but the ground was hiding blood. Inside, 12 SEALs and 1 wounded woman sat in the dark. Their breaths were heavy, their eyes wide, and their weapons held tight. Jessa Ruiz sat against the cave wall, holding her shoulder, blood soaked through her jacket. But she didn't complain. She had never been trained for combat. She had never fired a real rifle on the field. She was just a tech, a voice in a chair, a ghost behind a drone, but now she was flesh and bone, bleeding, cold, and hunted. Lieutenant Mark Dawson knelt beside her, tying a pressure bandage. "You're out of your mind," he whispered. "You drove into a war zone alone." Jessa looked at him, her voice weak but steady. "You were dying. I couldn't sit there and watch it happen." He stared at her, then gave a tired smile. "Remind me never to piss off a drone operator." A soft laugh echoed through the cave. The first laugh in hours, maybe days. The SEALs had questions. They wanted to know her name, her rank, how she got there. But more than anything, they wanted to know why. Why would someone break every rule, risk her life, and go rogue, just to save strangers? Jessa didn't have a long answer. She just looked around at their faces and said, "Because no one else did." Mark looked at her hands. Still stained with dried blood, still steady. She had guided them through chaos, fired sniper rounds with deadly precision, drawn enemy fire away, and now she was here. A woman they had never met had just fought harder for them than some commanders ever had. Outside, enemy forces regrouped. The bluff had confused them, but the second wave was smarter. They had drones of their own, and they were angry. They started sweeping the hillside with heat scanners and motion sensors. Inside the cave, Jessa's tablet beeped softly. One of her field sensors still worked. She checked it and whispered, "They're coming. Southeast slope. 5 minutes." Mark turned to his men. "We're out of explosives, half our ammo's gone. And Reyes can't walk." He looked around, then met Jessa's eyes. "You're the only one who knows the terrain. Any ideas?" Jessa closed her eyes, thinking fast. Then she remembered a military map. An old tunnel entrance about 200 meters west. A smuggler's path used in the last war. Maybe it still existed. She pointed to the ridge. "There's a crawl tunnel west side. Behind the rocks, and we can fit through it, but we have to move now." Mark nodded. He lifted Reyes onto his back, and 2 others helped with Echo 9. The rest formed a shield around Jessa. She had saved them. Now it was their turn. As they moved through the snow, the wind picked up. The mountain howled like it knew death was near. Jessa's body shook from pain and cold, but she kept walking. Then, the sky lit up. A flare from the enemy, shots followed, the SEALs returned fire. Forming a wall of bullets, Jessa hit the ground. Crawling toward the tunnel entrance, one SEAL took a hit in the leg and fell. Jessa turned around, dragged him with both arms. Her injured shoulder screaming in pain, she didn't stop. Mark yelled, "Go! Get to the tunnel!" One by one, they slipped into the narrow stone hole. Pulling each other forward, the sound of gunfire faded behind them. Replaced by echoes and darkness, inside the tunnel it was cold and tight. Their bodies scraped against jagged stone. Their boots slipped on wet earth. But they kept going, because behind them was death, and ahead of them, maybe a chance. They crawled for 20 minutes before the tunnel opened up into a rocky basin. Above they saw a helicopter, black. Marked with friendly signals, evac had arrived, late. But not too late. As the chopper landed, the SEALs helped each other up the hill. Jessa was the last to climb. Her legs shaking, her arms barely working. Mark grabbed her hand, pulled her up, and said, "You saved us. And now we're not letting you go down." As they lifted off into the sky, the battlefield below disappeared beneath the clouds. Jessa looked down at the hills, the snow, the smoke. She had come here to operate a drone. She was leaving as the woman who refused to sit and watch. Inside the helicopter, the SEALs surrounded her. Silent at first, then one by one. They saluted her. She shook her head, tears in her eyes. "I'm not a soldier," she whispered. Mark replied, "You are now," and in that moment, for the first time in her life, Jessa Ruiz wasn't just a voice on the radio. She was one of them, a warrior, a fighter. A woman who wasn't supposed to fight, but did anyway, and changed everything. 2 weeks had passed since the rescue. The snow had melted in the mountains, but the memory of that battle still burned like fire. The 12 SEALs were now safe in a secure base, their wounds healing, their minds trying to process what had happened. But one name kept echoing through their heads, Corporal Jessa Ruiz. She was no longer in the field. She was now in a military courtroom, sitting straight in her uniform, shoulder in a sling and eyes forward, facing charges for disobedience, drone theft, unauthorized weapon fire, and abandoning post. The room was full of officers, judges, lawyers, and commanders. They all sat high and quiet, looking down at the woman who had broken every rule in the book. Some whispered behind papers, others stared coldly. But Jessa didn't flinch, not once. A military prosecutor stood tall and shouted. She violated direct orders. She endangered international security. She compromised military structure. He pointed toward her like she was the enemy. She is not a hero, she is a hazard. Jessa didn't speak. She had already told her truth. She had already written every detail in her report. Now she just waited. But what no one expected was what came next. The courtroom doors opened slowly. 12 men walked in, bandaged, bruised, and limping but alive. The entire SEAL team had arrived. Every one of them in full uniform, eyes locked on the judge. They sat quietly in the front row. Then Lieutenant Mark Dawson stood up. Permission to speak on behalf of the accused, he said. The room fell silent. The judge nodded slowly. Permission granted. Mark stepped forward. Chest out, voice calm but heavy with truth. We were sent on a mission that went wrong, he began. We were cut off, ambushed, left with no support. He looked directly at the prosecutor. She didn't disobey orders, she disobeyed silence. Gasps echoed across the room. He continued, when command turned away, she turned toward us. When we were pinned, she gave us cover. When I thought I was going to die, I heard her voice one by one. The other SEALs stood. Echo 9 limped to the microphone and said, she risked everything for men she had never met. Another SEAL added, she took a bullet and still came for us. The judge looked surprised. You're saying she saved all 12 of you? Mark replied, we're saying we owe her our lives. Then, one SEAL reached into his jacket. He pulled out a folded American flag, torn, dirt-stained and burned on one side. This was flying over our last safe spot, he said. When we lost it, we thought we'd die. He walked forward and placed it on Jess's table. You brought it back, ma'am. Tears filled Jess's eyes. But she didn't cry. She just placed her hand gently over the flag. For the first time, she felt like she belonged. The prosecutor stepped back, speechless. His arguments had turned to dust. What could rules mean? If they failed to protect the people following them? The judge sat quietly for a long moment. Then he said words that made history. Charges dropped, he declared. This court recognizes Corporal Ruiz as a field combat hero. Her actions, though unorthodox, upheld the deepest values of this nation. Applause broke out. From officers, from SEALs, from people who never believed a tech in a chair could become a warrior in a storm. Later that evening, Jessa stood alone outside the courtroom. Mark walked up to her, holding a folded piece of paper. What's this? She asked. He smiled. Transfer request. To your new post? She raised an eyebrow. What post? He replied, Frontline Overwatch Special Task Force with us. Jessa laughed for the first time in days. You want me in your squad? We need you in our squad, Mark said. Only difference is, this time, you won't have to break the rules to save us. Jessa looked out at the sunset. Orange light poured over the hills. Peaceful now. She remembered the fear, the fire, the first shot she took and how it all led to this moment. I'll think about it, she said softly. Mark grinned. That's not a no. She grinned back. No, it's not. Weeks later, Jessa visited a quiet military cemetery. She carried a box, inside it her sniper gloves, her old drone keys and a letter. She placed them at a stone marked Echo 7, never forgotten. She knelt down and whispered, You didn't make it out, but the rest did. I kept my promise. She stood, saluted, and walked away. Because Corporal Jessa Ruiz was no longer just a name behind a screen. She was a name that echoed through stone, through snow, and through every soldier who lived because she didn't wait for permission. She was the woman who wasn't supposed to fight. But she fought anyway, and became the reason 12 warriors made it home.